You maybe have a work assignment, right, that you procrastinated on. And so instead of turning that assignment with the best work you can possibly give, you rush the last minute. You don't double check your grammar. You don't double check the data points. You don't double check your conclusions. You just get something done, hand it in because that was good enough. So ask yourself why you're not progressing or not advancing in your life. Are you living to those standards that you speak so highly about yourself too? I've been in plenty accountability groups where, people are trying to demonstrate what their standard is, but then you see them not changing at all. When you see them in person the next time, they haven't changed a bit. I already know then that's just a good enough guy. You might talk a good game, but you're just a good enough guy. Do not spend your time around people that are just good enough guys. Because what happens, you assume those good enough guy qualities. And I'll tell you what, in this competitive, hyper-competitive world of trying to be elite, good enough is not good enough. You have got to be elite. You got to live to that standard. Yo, what's up, everybody? This is the End-to-End Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Yun Nguyen. Known as the Ninja or Prolific Ninja by my family and friends, and because my fans are my friends, you can call me Ninja too. This is the End-to-End Podcast, the Alpha to the Omega, the beginning to the end, talking about life, motivation, drive, success, self-improvement, and offering you morsels in this all-you-can-eat buffet called life. Back in my conference room studio, because of timing, this thing is kicking off as to this PFAS campaign. Like, I am all over the place. But also because so proud of my guy. Started his first day of his senior class at locally St. Thomas Episcopal right here in Houston, Texas. Back in the conference room, glad to be here. Before I get into the main topic of the episode, I want to start my episode as I start every episode and as I start every one of my days, which is, if you are new to the show, I always express gratitude. When I wake up in the morning, open my eyes, I say, hello, God. Thank God, thank the universe for another day, another opportunity to be great, another day to hopefully inspire somebody to reach their fullest controllable potential. And with that, I want to thank you all, everybody out there in podcast land, in End-to-End Nation. Thank you all for listening, supporting, following, and most importantly, sharing the show. To that note, I do this on my own time, do this on my own dime. I'm in my own conference room, right? Spend a lot of money to my guys, just cut them a big hefty check this morning. They produce the show, create this content, relentless. Shout out to Tim Grover. But we're relentless about this. But because it's on my own dime, on my own time, the only way this message gets out is if you share the show. So I like to say that if you found something useful, funny, humorous, applicable to you, yourself, your friends, your family, your mom, your dad, whatever, something, anything about this episode or any of the episodes that you enjoyed, please do share the show. I like to say, if you're knowledge swole, share the show. That is how we grow. This particular episode, so as I said, we just dropped my boy out, or he actually drove, but we had a massive, awesome ceremony at St. Thomas Episcopal regarding his first day of school. And it just reminded me that, with every opportunity, you're only going to be as good in that opportunity as which you set your standard. This particular morning, they have a chapel forum every day at class, so this was the first one. And I saw the standard that this school sets, very high, which is great. Nothing against any other schools out there or whatever, but it sets the standard pretty high. And that applies to everything we do. As high as you set your standard is as high as you're going to get. Okay? Now, within that, you might set your standard high, but do you actually perform or live up or put your mindset, your actions, your activity, your goals to that standard? Okay, be honest with yourself, because I know hundreds of people that, man, my standards are up here, my standards are up here, my standards are up here, my standards are up here. But what ultimately happens is all they end up being is the good enough guy. And I'm sure you all know plenty of good enough guys out there. And what does that mean? That means your standards may be up here, but you settle for that's good enough down here. Hey, I'm going to wake up every morning, 5 a.m. and go train, You go do it the first day, you do it the second day, third day, you wake up, but then you're like, man, let me just skip out. And in your mind, subconsciously, you're like, hey man, I did the last 2 days, that should be good enough. So then day 4 comes around, man, I already worked out 2 days, I skipped yesterday, but still that's good enough. 5th day, you're not even motivated or driven anymore to hold that standard of a 5 a.m. workout every day because you're good enough, right? You maybe have a work assignment, right, that you procrastinated on. And so instead of turning that assignment with the best work you can possibly give, you rush the last minute. You don't double check your grammar. You don't double check the data points. You don't double check your conclusions. You just get something done, hand it in because that was good enough. So ask yourself why you're not progressing or not advancing in your life, right? Are you living to those standards that you speak so highly about yourself too? That's a real question. See, for me, every time when I feel like I want to be that good enough guy, I stop and I ask myself, what is the standard I should be living here? Because if in that decision I don't jump up to that standard, then I'm just a good enough guy. And I'm going to be frank with y'all, good enough guys don't go anywhere because they only stay good enough. They're never elite. They're never top of the mountain. Because good enough guys don't push that little last effort to the standard to get them to the top, to get them over the hump. It's just good enough, man. It's good. Right? I equate your standard as like a water level in the pool. Right? However deep it is, the deeper the water level is, the more depth you have in your life. So the deeper your standards go, or I should say the higher your standards go, creating that depth, the more depth you will have in your life. See, if you're on the shallow end and you can just stand up and be above the water, then your standards are too low. You can just stand up and you're already past whatever you're supposed to do, which is not a high goal. Now, if you're on the deeper end where you're 20-foot deep pool of water, that's a deep standard. And to maintain that standard, to maintain your head above that water, you're going to have to struggle and work real hard, or what happens? You drown. But that is a deep standard. And so the deeper the water, what do you think? More or less people are going to be there. Fewer people are going to be there. So whoever has the depth of standard and is able to tread the water the longest, stay your head above water on those standards, that's going to be the one who excels. But it takes both. It takes setting that level and treading the water and doing the work to stay above that standard. Because if you don't, you become a good enough guy and you actually drown. You're drowning with everyone else. So ask yourself, do you hold yourself to the standard you set, which you claim to set for yourself? Or are you just a good enough guy? I've been in plenty of accountability groups where, people are trying to demonstrate what their standard is, but then you see them not changing at all. When you see them in person the next time, they haven't changed a bit. I already know then that's just a good enough guy. You might talk a good game, but you're just a good enough guy. And yes, you can acquaint with them, but I will tell you now, it's so important. There's that episode about you become the habits and behaviors of the 5 closest people you spend the most time with. Not who you're around, it's who you spend the most time with. You do not want to be spending your time. If you're a high achiever or want to be, do not spend your time around people that are just good enough guys. Because what happens, you assume those good enough guy qualities. And I'll tell you what, in this competitive, hyper-competitive world of trying to be elite, good enough is not good enough. You have got to be elite. You got to live to that standard. Right? It's just, go back to my son. I mean, it's so crazy how the life that he is living embodies so many of the principles required of success because he is now wanting to play college basketball at a super high level. Okay, going from into a senior year, recruitment time, potentially, hopefully, college basketball. At whatever level, but, only 2%, 3% of high school guys get into a spot in college. That's super elite. So do you think 2 or 3% guys going to get there being just good enough guys? Man, I don't have to do these extra reps. That's good enough. I'll put in 2 hours. That's good enough. I've worked out 3 days this week. That's good enough. I don't need to go again. Right? I don't need to stretch. I already lifted. I'm good. That's good enough. So when you come across people, nah, man, that's good enough. Don't worry about it. You want to avoid that. You don't want to assume those habits. So again, ask yourself, what are your standards? Are you living to those standards? Are you exceeding that standard? How deep is your pool and the water level for those standards? Are you treading above water, or are you sinking and you're sinking and you're sinking? Are you being just good enough, or are you really living to be elite? Do not be just a good enough guy. Okay? I strive to not be just a good enough guy. Honestly, we could have checked off, hey man, this week my schedule's too packed. Can't make a podcast, so this would be the first week we'd skip in 2.5 years. Right? Oh man, we had a 2.5 year run, no missing an episode. That's good enough. Could have done that. But my team here, they came to my office, short notice. We're rescheduling all throughout the week just to make it happen so that we can stay on track. Stay with the standard that we set, which is never to miss a week. And here we are. We went beyond good enough. It could have been good enough. I mean, most podcasters quit after 5 episodes. Here we are on, I think, 121, 122. Haven't missed a beat. Changing our schedules, moving things around, making it happen because we don't want to be just good enough. We actually want to be great. So that's the mentality that it takes. Every time you feel like you don't want to do something that you know you're supposed to do, ask yourself, am I being a good enough guy, or am I going for greatness? It's very simple as that, but you got to become aware. Okay, so strive to be great, not just the good enough guy. Glad to be back on the podcast, glad to be back on the microphone, glad to have been able to make this happen on a very tight schedule in my conference room. Listen, I know I said before at the start of this episode, we don't have any sponsors, which is true. Do this on my own dime, do this on my own time. But if you really want to support the show, please share the show. If you found out that you're a good enough guy and you need to change your behavior, please do share the show. Send this to another good enough guy so that they change their behavior. But number 2, to support this show, listen, we're running a very, very passionate campaign around helping people with cancer. And that is helping them recover any type of money from companies that have contaminated the water with a chemical called PFAS, P-F-A-S, P-F-A-S. We are on a mission to help as many cancer people affected by cancer as possible. As an example, there was a case last year in West Virginia, 3,500 cancer patients settled against a major corporation for $900 million. Over $900 million. The average payout for each of those cancer patients was $259,000. $259,000. Game changer for these families. My law firm mission statement is changing people's lives. That kind of money can change people's lives. So go to pfasinjuryattorney.com, pfasinjuryattorney.com, or PFAS lawyer on X/Twitter. If you know anybody, and I guarantee you do, or your mom does, or your family does, if you know anybody that has cancer, please direct them to that website. By directing them there, hopefully we can help them from a legal, medical sense, but that'll also help this show and continue to grow this show, expanding our reach to hopefully inspiring billions of lives across the planet. So I'll end the show as I end my day. Y'all know that when I put my head down, close my eyes, thank God, the universe, for another day to be able to be great, hopefully to have inspired somebody to live to the fullest controllable potential. And with that, I want to thank you all for supporting the show. So be great today, but be even more grateful. Talk to you soon.